and it is my pleasure to introduce from the Toronto Star, Laura Armstrong. Laura, welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Good to be here.
Pleasure's all mine. Great to have you on. Happy New Year to you, Laura. I wanted to have you on tonight, Laura, to talk about this grueling start to TFC schedule. It was released today. 8 games on the road. We know why they're on the road, because of the second phase of BMO. And to me, looking at this schedule, Laura, I'd like to get your thoughts on it. It is not easy at all, especially with a lot of these clubs being in their own conference. They really need to try and get a split coming home and take care of that home schedule as well.
Yeah, Anthony, it's certainly not an easy schedule to start off the season. Toronto FC always knew that it wasn't going to be an easy start. We've known for a long time, since the expansion of BMO Field started, that they were going to have the first 8 games on the road. But President Bill Manning said at the end of the year last year that the club expects to come home with 8 points. That's the goal that he set the target for his team, and that's going to be a very difficult target to reach if you look at the 8 games that they're going to be playing against teams that most of which landed ahead of them in the standings last year.
You know, Laura, I look at this and they're going to be playing the champs, the Portland Timbers, May 1st. They're going to be playing the Red Bulls, who are supposed to be in the final right off the top. They're going to be playing New England, who's never been easy on them on home field. And also Montreal. We know what happened there in the playoff. So to me, I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, boy, oh boy, they're going to be lucky to come back home with 2 wins, maybe a draw at best.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Anthony. I mean, if you look at it, they've got New York City FC, which has been a hard venue for them. Yankee Stadium, you can't count them out either. You can't call that an easy win, despite the fact that New York City ended up in the standings lower than them last year. And it doesn't seem like there's any game that really comes up you think to yourself, yeah, that's the one that Toronto's going to win. So it's hard to see them coming back with 8 points, in my opinion. We haven't seen the Toronto FC lineup. We haven't seen the new additions, what that means for the quality of the side. But at this point, based on the team that we had at the end of last year, it is going to be very, very difficult for them in those 8 games.
The additions that they made, Laura, we'll get into that in just a moment, I believe are the right additions for this club moving into 2016. My only concern is starting on the road for these 8 games. I believe the microscope, the floodlights are going to be on head coach Greg Vanney. I put my cards on the table, Laura. I like Greg. I like him as a person. I like him as a young coach. I like him as a communicator. So I'm willing to give him the start. I've got to know the guy quite well, and I back him. But I believe if he comes back, Laura, with 1 win, maybe 2, I think his time is done here, and I don't think he'll survive the home opener. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think that they've brought Greg back in, and they've said that, you know, this is going to be his first. Last season was really his first full season in the club. Let's give him an opportunity. And he said that the first thing that he's going to do is look inward in this season and see what he can do better as a coach to help this club. Now the club has done. I agree with you. Has made some great additions, and if he comes back with those additions having been made, and doesn't really have that 8 points, especially given Bill Manning has come out and said we want these 8 points, I think that he's going to have a very, very hard time staying in his role.
Laura, let's talk about the additions. I like them. Bringing in Drew Moore, Beta Shore, Will Johnson. To me, Will Johnson and Drew Moore are warriors. They're winners on and off the field. They're true top individuals. These guys in the dressing room will command respect. You add Bradley in there, who I think is the real deal. The MVP, Jovinko. Altidore better have a better year than he had in his first year here, or he's going to have a lot of people asking him to leave. But I think these are the right additions. I think they took care of 2 positions that are vitally important for TFC. But I'm concerned they're neglecting one big piece. That's the goalkeeping department, and they haven't addressed that yet. And if they don't, I feel that could be a big, big problem getting ready for 2016. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I first of all have to say that I hadn't dealt with Drew Moore before I spoke with him just at the conference call when he signed with TFC, and he seems like a guy who can support Michael Bradley, and I really think that's needed in the dressing room. I think that the team relies a lot on Michael Bradley's leadership, and I don't necessarily think that can be a one-person job. I think he needs other people supporting him, and I think Drew Moore is going to be a fantastic addition to the team, especially in the dressing room and along the back line, communicating to the other guys who I think will listen when he speaks. And I agree with you about the other additions, but I think that the goalkeeping scenario, there's still time. It's too soon to really panic at this point, but Bendick's gone. Konopka could be re-signed, but it will be a matter of him accepting lower money, which I don't know that will happen. And they don't even seem to be. There's not that much out there, so I really don't know where they're going to go with this. Perhaps they go to Europe, but they seem happy to bring in players from North America. So It seems like it's a neglected area right now, and you hope that given the strong additions that they've made on the field, you don't want that position to be suffering come really even preseason, but definitely come March.
You're bang on, because look, I remember that deadly look of the Atomic Ant Jovinko in one of the early games on the road, staring at Bendick, and also one time really saying some words in Italian that I understood what he was saying, in disgust, because some of the goals he gave up were absolutely brutal. And my concern again is that, Laura, is that you got Bradley, a world-class player, Jovinko, on and on. We don't have to go through it all over. And if these guys are going to be looking up behind and not confident, knowing that there's a guy there that's going to save their bacon, and there's going to be a guy that they can play in front of with confidence, that could affect these guys to start on the road. This is why I believe, in making my calls again today, that they have had some talks with a couple guys overseas in Europe. I'm not sure if they're going to go hard on one of these two guys, but they need to bring in a guy that's a veteran, a guy that's vocal, and a guy that commands respect in the dressing room as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say I was surprised when they didn't pick up the options of both Bendick and Chris Konopka. I thought Chris Konopka played quite well last season. I think that he's a player that you if he's willing to stay in the side, that he could be a player that challenges, or at least would challenge somebody to get into the team. So I have to say I was surprised by that. But yeah, that's an area that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed soon, because you want this player to play with the team as much as possible before the season kicks off. You don't want some stranger in between the pipes for you come September the 6th.
Agreed 100%. Laura, let's talk about the fans here. Let's talk about the wonderful support this franchise has gotten since day one. The loyal, passionate TFC supporters, they go to each and every game loud and boisterous through only seeing one playoff game in the city of Montreal, and what a disastrous game that was. And to me, I think this year is not only about getting into the playoffs, but going much further than a one game and done. I believe that they must go farther, or people are going to be asking a lot of questions of Tim Bezbatchenko, of if Greg Vanney's still around, on and on and on. And I believe that the clock will be ticking on some of these decisions.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that I think we can say this year, and I think the team said this year, that it was a letdown that they didn't get past the knockout round this year. I mean, I was surprised by the way that they, sort of the attitude that the team took and playing offensively in the final game of the regular season. I thought that, perhaps it would have been better for them to play a more defensive lineup and then secure themselves a better place, maybe possibly even a home field advantage. And I was surprised at the way they went about that. And then the game in Montreal was brutal. It was embarrassing, and the fans deserved much more than that. And I think that the fans can and should expect from their team better this season, expect more. I think that the expectation should be at least the knockout round, or at least the first two-leg stage, because this team is not going to get. It's not, part of the great part of TFC is the fans, but they need to be propelling their team forward rather than just supporting them blindly.
You know, Laura, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Just before I let you go, Laura, I wanted to ask your opinion, your thoughts on this. I've covered the grassroots here in Ontario and Canada for 20 plus years, working in League One Ontario. There is now a strong appetite down south in the NCAA colleges and universities to get more Canadian players down there because of the #1 pick, the sensational season he had, Kyle Larin. We saw Richie Laryea now as a Generation Adidas guy going into MLS, on and on. And I've been hearing this from a lot of youth clubs and academies in Ontario specifically, that they're concerned that TFC is not doing enough to really bring up a real strong Canadian player. Jonathan Osorio, God bless him, he is doing tremendous, and he's one example. But they're looking for more of that Canadian flavor, that Ontario flavor. If they don't see this, do you find that, some of these fans might start getting turned off, even though there is a Jovinko, Bradley, on and on, that they're not seeing some of their local kids make it up here?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that, I think right now TFC benefits from the fact that while there are lots of great Canadian players coming in, and I think you'll see that with Will Johnson coming in and him being a Canadian boy, that's going to help things out. But there are a lot of, there's not a huge number of Canadians playing in the league right now. So I think that as you see players like Kyle Larin, like Richie Laryea, I know that Sigma FC, their club, thinks that they have some great players to come in the next couple of years. And I think that as that happens, people will have expectations that you see Canadian players play for a Canadian team. It's a dream story, especially, Torontonians. It's great. It was great to see Jonathan Osorio. It was one of the moments of the season for me to see Jonathan Osorio celebrate in front of the fans when TFC clinched on October 14th. So, those are moments that people that resonate with people, and I think that eventually it will become something that the fans press the club for, and people start to talk about more. I don't necessarily know that that's going to be a topic of conversation right away, because TFC still has a lot of other things. There's a lot of other things that fans want before they want Canadian players playing for their teams. But I think with players like Kyle Larin, with players like Osorio getting more attention these days, why not? Why wouldn't you want to have them? If they're of the quality, then why wouldn't you want to have a Canadian playing for a Canadian team?
Couldn't agree with you more. And I'll give them credit with TFC too. Boy, oh boy, 3/4, if not a little bit more than that, is stocked with good young Ontario players, Canadian players. So I credit Tim Bazbachenko, Greg Vanny, all the staff there at the Academy to continuously filter wonderful young talent there to TFC2. Laura, it's been a blast. We thank you so much for joining us here on Red Card. Don't be a stranger. And again, Happy New Year to you and continued success at that wonderful newspaper, the Toronto Star. We love reading it. And again, we thank you so much for making time to join us.
You too. Have a great Happy New Year to Anthony, and I'll talk to you soon.
That is Laura Armstrong of the Toronto Star. Great of her to join us. Outstanding young talent on the rise here in Toronto and Canada. Follow her on Twitter at Laura ARMY. That's, Laura Army. Yeah, Laura Army on Twitter. So outstanding having Laura Armstrong on talking about TFC and the schedule.